As our panel here will soon show you, there's a lot more good watchmaking going on in other countries besides Switzerland. From the closest to me, we have Stephan Sapaneva from Finland, Richard Habring from Austria, Benoit Mittan from Belgium, and our sole Swiss watchmaker, Roman Goitier from the Vallée du Jour in Switzerland. Their panel here, I would like to give you a bit of a flavour for independent watchmaking, but it's just to show you that there's just no one, this is the kind of profile of an independent watchmaker. And as a matter of fact, half of our panel are not qualified watchmakers. We've got Stephan and Richard, the two closest, are watchmakers, but the other two, despite making very interesting watches as well, come from quite diverse backgrounds. With Stephan from Finland, he studied at the Helsinki Watchmaking School, which is one of the world's best watchmaking schools and probably one of the few independent watchmaking schools that are still running outside of Switzerland. But like many passionate watchmakers, he did come to Switzerland after qualifying as a watchmaker to study at Worstep, because there's a very famous complications course you can do in Neuchâtel at Worstep, and often when watchmakers come to this course, you've got a lot of the brands looking to see any good watchmakers there, and they will make them an offer to stay and work. In the case of Stephan, he went to work for Michel Parmigiani, who, while some of you might know the brand Parmigiani, Michel basically came to, I won't say fame because not many people know outside of Switzerland, but he is one of the world's greatest restorers of watches. Also at Parmigiani, Stephan learned from him, but also a fellow Finn called Kari Voutilainen, who's next door and giving a talk a little bit later today. After worked for Christophe Claret, another brand that's here, and for Vianney Halter. Now from Kari Voutilainen, he's very much an old school, traditional. Stephan learnt the right way to do things to a very high level. From Vianney Halter, he learnt you don't have to be bound by the rules. Anything is possible if you can just get your brain free. After finishing in Switzerland then, Stephan went back to Finland, launched his own brand of watches, and I think it's fair to say Stephan owns the moon. When it comes to watches, he's developed a very distinctive moon face, which if you look carefully, you'll see a resemblance to his own. And this has led him to have a very distinctive identity from his brand. You'll find this large and small on many of his watches. And also, he's done a collaboration with MB&F on one of their watches, another brand that's downstairs. Richard Habring from Austria worked for many years with IWC, and he was instrumental there of developing their, the Doppel chronograph, which was a fantastic split seconds chronograph, even more impressive for the fact that it was a relatively affordable split seconds chronograph. Now, while most of you might be familiar with a chronograph, you start and stop, it measures the time. A split second chronograph, you can measure two separate intervals. You can stop and start a small section while the main second hand is still running. So it's quite a complicated watch. After the patent ran out for IWC, Richard then moved back after quite a long time at IWC. He moved back to Austria, and with his wife Maria, they, in 2004, launched a brand, Habring 2, and he developed a modular system that works over a wide range of complications, so he can customize their watches quite well for individual customers. And he's launched his own split-second chronograph a couple of years ago. And after working in relative obscurity, because for most of these small watchmakers, the big problem is being known, being seen by people such as yourselves. Richard basically won the lotto when his chronograph won first prize at last year's Grand Prix de Genève, which is like the Oscars of watchmaking. First prize in the sports watch category. Benoit Mitten from Belgium is actually, I think we can say he still is, he's an industrial designer. He didn't come from any watchmaking experience whatsoever. He was a very successful, and I say was, industrial designer because he recently has stopped doing that to concentrate on his brand full time. Benoit doesn't like hands on watches. And basically, even though hands have been around for a long time, and I think most of us haven't had much of a problem using hands to tell the time, Benoit thinks they could be better. So one of the things he's done, and that's inspired him to develop his watch, he replaced the hands with graphical representations of hands, which are basically little white lines on rotating discs that look like hands. But by avoiding the need for hands to cross over, he's managed to reduce the height between the display of time and ourselves. And his idea, he would like us to see the time just like we can recognize a smile on a face. We don't really have to look at it or consciously look at it. We can just see what the time is. So with this method of getting rid of the hands, it's enabled him to bring the display closer to us. With his last watch, though, which is called the Resonance Type 3, he's taken that to a further extreme by filling the dial side with a fluid, which takes away the refraction that you probably don't even notice when you look at your watch, but it makes it look like the display is actually on the surface of the crystal. And when I first saw the prototype of this a couple of years ago, Benoit said, "Oh, look, Ian, please appreciate that this is just the prototype." And I said, "Well, I can see that because you've obviously just painted the hands on the surface of the crystal." And he said, no, that's because of the fluid. So it's certainly very impressive. Roman Goitier is our sole Swiss representative on this panel. He started his life as a precision engineer. Went straight from college, worked in a CNC department of a very well-respected firm up in the Vallée du Jour, which is really one of the centers of complicated switch watchmaking in Switzerland. And at the ripe old age of 25, he decided he'd like to run his own watch brand. He didn't really have any more of an idea than that, but did realize that people probably won't take me seriously because I don't have much business experience. Probably it's fair to say none. And he went off and did an MBA. Was the youngest person to do an MBA in Lausanne at the business school. And then his thesis to graduate from this MBA was Mont Roman Goitier. In secret, he made all the components for his watch, and he launched his own watch brand with his own movement, doing practically everything himself. Not being a watchmaker, he appreciates the tradition of the Vallée du Jour, but he approaches things from an engineer's point of view, and if he sees what he feels are weak points in a watch, he doesn't hesitate to do something else. This led him to take away the typical crown on the side of the watch, and he put a flat crown on the back, which saves the energy having to turn 90 degrees. And he's also, with his last watch, the Logical 1, has reinvented a famous complication called the chain and fusee, which uses a cone-shaped device with a chain to keep a constant force for the watch. There are a number of limitations with the chain and fusee, which Roman has managed to overcome by getting rid of the fusee, the cone, and replacing it with a snail-shaped cam. So that's just to give you an idea of the variety of the experience and the gentleman we've had here. What we're going to do today, though, is just find out why you should be interested, or why I'd like you to be interested in independent watchmaking and the kind of challenges they face. So if I can ask Stepan, what motivated you to, because I appreciate, like mechanics, most watchmakers work for big companies. It's a job, they've got families, homes to pay for. It is a big risk going out and launching your own brand. So you need a strong motivation. So Stepan, what was your motivation?
Actually, when I worked in the bigger companies, it was always it was a challenge. I challenged myself when I saw the products that I worked on it, that I questioned why it was made in that way. And I started to work on my mind already that why it could be made in a different way, and you know, because you work 40 hours per week behind the bench with the eyeglass, you see really closely the watches. So it was something that I started, and actually, like all the watchmakers, we start to play with old watches, we modify them a bit or something. And from my background, my father was a jewelry designer, and I like like everything that is metallic or metal and like a technical parts. So one day I turned a pocket watch from my old Harley Davidson kickstart pinion, and that was like the start of everything. And but the motivation was always there that I needed to do something for my own, and actually.
And you did?
I did, and I'm still doing.
Richard, what was your motivation? You'd come from a big structured company.
Right. Actually, I was pretty privileged in the beginning 90s to come to Switzerland and to see this very old traditional way of watchmaking. And as said already in the beginning, the industry has been changing a lot in the last 30 years, or 25 years. And it happened to be that over the time, I found out that of course, big brands have a lot of tradition, and they are trying to reach their primary targets, but those targets are very often not, or on the very first point, there is not always making the customers happy. And this was actually what we were discussing with my wife Maria when thinking about going independent. I said, okay, there must be a more pure way to make simply customers happy by doing what we are very best in, to do watches, to make customers happy, just simply, without tradition, without anything we need to take care about. So it's much easier to do it on an independent level.
Benoit?
For me, as being not being a watchmaker, an industrial designer, not living in Switzerland and not knowing anyone in that business, I was more, for me the starting point was more like, why are watches so much the same? And as a designer, you have a certain instinct of always trying to create your view on a certain subject. And many designers are known for their chairs or for their products. I was thinking, okay, let's design a watch for myself. And that was a first point. And by traveling, I visited Basel World a few times, and I always came back with the idea I have to choose between bling bling, between bleakness, or boredom. And so these were the three possibilities, but there was not really a brand or extremely expensive. So there was the possibility. So I thought, why isn't there something in between? The product watch from an industrial designer point of view is a rich product because it combines many dimensions that a product needs to have to be interesting. For example, you have the ergonomy, you wear it, you have to be able to read it, you have to be able to wind it, to set it. So there are many, it looks like something that hangs on your arm, but in fact there are many interactions with you physically. It's certainly technological, so you didn't talk too much about the technicity, but it's a big part of the concept is that the Renaissance watch is based on a patent, and a patent is a technological thing. So technologically, it has a technological dimension. Why having hands? You said it a little bit, going from the archaic hand that we have since Stone Age, approximately, going to something that is more like a screen, than a mechanical screen, of course, bringing everything in one plane, becoming really graphical, because the flatter you make it, the more easy it is to read. So this also has to do with ergonomics. Of course, there's the aesthetical element. You like it or you don't, but you have every watch has an aesthetical part. And of course, there's the marketing. How to build a brand is also very interesting because you can put values in there, try to make that coherent. So it's a rich subject to work in.
Roman, what was you were nearly a child in relation whereas the others have had experience in at least decades, I suppose. At 25, you were quite young to decide to have a brand. What inspired that?
I think the main point is that I was born in the right place. I can say I was lucky of that I was born in Switzerland, and I was born in the Vallée de Joux. So it's where Audemars Piguet is based, is where Breguet, Blancpain, Jaeger-LeCoultre. Now we have a big department of Patek Philippe, a big department of Vacheron Constantin. So I was born there. So that means all of my life I saw the posters and all of that with wonderful brands. And I love the mechanical items. I understand the mechanism and I understand all of that. When I was young, I was thinking, doing watchmaking, it will be like everybody. I don't see the way to doing the things like that. So it's why my background is more in relation about mechanism to understand how works machinery. And a day after to run this company, who was one of the most famous in Switzerland to doing parts of watches, I was thinking a day, well, to doing parts. You understand the mechanism and all of that kind of things because you know how to build machineries. And at the end, a watch is a small machine. So I was thinking, well, yeah, could be possible. And the things that I learned in life is that never live with regrets. So it was one of my dreams, and today I can say I took a lot of risk, but I think when you are an entrepreneur, it's the kind of risk that I can say maybe easily take. And I'm very happy that now since 2000, when I started to think about doing something in relation of watchmaking, the road is long, but with the last piece, I'm very happy because I think now more collectors and people around the world can understand that a watch is a mechanism. And it has been, the watchmaking is not only watchmaker, like Jaeger-LeCoultre always say, there is almost 60 type of works to realize a watch. So it has been, it's depending where you are. But I was very lucky in the fact that I concept from the idea, the conception, the construction on the 3D, all of the drawings and the design, all of that is made by myself. With the first caliber, I also made that, but I also made the parts. So it has mean I took around 2 years to realize the parts with my hands. And now I'm very lucky to have a team. But the sense why I try to doing something in the watchmaking is because basically, I was born there. And for me, it was just natural to think about that.
Now, Roman has the advantage of having the personal skills and the location that he's in the right area to be getting components made. But even though you can run a watch brand from probably any country in the world, when you're doing high-end watches, I think it's fair to say Switzerland, for getting components made, is generally the place most people will come to. So I'd like to know, what are the difficulties you've found, Stepan, from trying to source components, and I assume you do source components in Switzerland.
Yeah, of course I need something from Switzerland, but I try my best to be out from the Switzerland on its way that and I hope that it's also something that you can see on my watches, that they look different and I try to be different, and maybe that's a part of the difference, because the rules that are made in Switzerland, like most of the industry is using, they're already like 100 years old, and you know, for me they look a bit similar always, and maybe this is the key element why my watches are different, that I have to challenge myself to create the parts on a way that it's possible to do in Finland.
And Richard, you're not living so far from Switzerland, but still there must be issues involved in being outside of the country. What kind of problems do you face?
Well, we are trying to focus our suppliers a little bit in our near, which means we try to have them in Austria or in Germany or the latest in Switzerland, and it works pretty well so far. But when it comes to very specialized parts like wheels and those kind of things, which are really very watchmaking stuff, you can have cases made by specialists, mechanics in Austria too. But when it comes to watchmaking parts, then there is no way aside Austria, no other way than to get them from Switzerland. And the probably biggest problem in the last years, especially for brands like ours, we were facing in the very low capacities all the producers can offer to small companies, as all the big boys in the business occupying all those capacities a lot. And we hear a lot of complaints of all those small contributors of the big brands that it's very risky for them to rely only on the big.
And Benoit, I happen to know that he's flying to Switzerland perhaps once a week. Although he's from Belgium, most of the watchmaking is, well, if not all of the watchmaking is done in Switzerland.
Yeah, it's done.
I can only imagine that's logistically a problem, but not coming from a watchmaking background at the beginning, did you realize that would be such an issue?
Well, today is the biggest issue I have to face with. That's my main concern, is to be able to have the good components at the good price, at the good moment. And this is for smaller brands. I was thinking it's because I'm from Belgium that it's going so difficultly, but even the Swiss face the problem. And yeah, it's true. It's really it's so important, and it's something I have to say. I think the brand would be a little bit further if I would not underestimate the importance of that. I was thinking, okay, I work with a supplier, he works for this company and that and that and that, the biggest names you can imagine. So if he makes my parts, they will be okay. And it's not. They're not okay. You have to control everything. And so in the beginning, I was a bit naive, and I thought, yes, if I send a drawing with the tolerances and everything, I will get the parts like they're on the drawing. Well, it's often the case, fortunately, but sometimes it's not, and it's that one part that is not in the tolerance that creates an enormous problem, because it's usually one of the parts that is assembled in one of the first things you assemble, but you discover that it doesn't work really when the watch is finished. So it creates logistically a big issue. So yes, of course, I have adapted all my procedures not to have that anymore, but it's true, it's really an issue.
Roman, you probably make and control your own production, probably the most out of our panel here. Have things been harder or easier than you expected?
For me, I don't have any problem with that, because we're just doing by your own.
So what are your biggest issues then?
Yeah, for me, doing parts to doing every kind of single parts, like in the last one with Logical, I think the level of capacity that we have today is to produce that level of parts. So you can imagine if I would have to buy one of the single parts, it could be the chain, it could be bridges, it's going to be very difficult to find a person. To get the quality, just impossible. And after that, the price will be overpriced. So it has been, for me, it was but it's my background. So I use my background also to doing something different, because for me, the base of the watchmaking is not the outside, is what is inside.
But
and
what
this is my respect. But
what are your
for
problems?
For me today, I can say the biggest problem that I'm facing is that I'm not famous. And what,
Not yet.
And one of the things that the intention when a person wants to buy a product, it can be a watch or something like that, the biggest, the most powerful thing is the name. People think about, I would like to buy a Patek, I would like to buy a Breguet or something like that. So it has been, for me, my biggest problem to face is that. And it's like I said, there is 5 points that for me are really clear, that the clients are focused on the brand, are focused on the design, are focused on the price, are focused on the complication, and after that maybe I talk for us because we are really based on the finishing inside the watch, the finishing. So I knew that the first point, the name, I don't have. So I had to take care of the last force, and it's why I made, and with Logical, I think now collectors realize that anyway, if you are a small brand or a big, the aesthetic and the vision of doing something beautiful and interesting, it's not a question of money, it's a question of person. So it's why, for me, a small brand or a big brand can achieve to doing something incredible. It's not a question of money.
And Stepan, how have you managed to be known? How do people know about your watches?
Internet. And it's a good question, because I'm not like calculating what I'm really doing. I'm just like doing watches as what I feel like it could be. It's mostly, maybe it's a naive way, because it's not really like a good business way to think and turn the company, but still like the product itself, it has to be interesting some way. I'm not trying to please everybody. I try to be I try to be different, and that's the challenge, is to make interesting watches that people, when they see it, they will remember it, and they want to see more. They don't have to like it, but it's something that maybe they even talk it.
And Richard, did winning the Grand Prix prize, did that make much of a difference to you? Because I assume you're having the same kind of problems with visibility.
Absolutely. But for us, that Grand Prix, in fact, last year was a huge impact. And since the Grand Prix itself is something which is recognized all over the world. And to be one of the winners, of course, even though we had the impression on stage in Geneva, in the Grand Théâtre de Geneva, that some people there from the trade did not know what to do with us somehow, because we have been there very first time, and we came and we won, and it was a quite strange
this
situation.
was the first time the prize had gone outside of Switzerland, to a watch manufactured outside of Switzerland for this prize. So
right.
It's quite an achievement.
Right, and it was a huge impact, and it took us the next months following to really to answer all these requests of press international. So we got emails from press release from press. We did not even know that they existed.
And they probably thought the same about you until recently. And Benoit, is communication and marketing a major issue?
Of course. I'm like my colleagues here. I'm a small brand starting up, going to my 4th year.
Did you realize at the beginning that would be such a problem?
Yes. I think the watch business has been spoiled by communication. There's over-communication in that business. that have been installed by the bigger groups. So yes, I knew communication was an issue, but I also knew that I did not have the money to pay for all this communication. And so, yeah, one of the choices I made was to make a product. If I would make a watch, it would have had to be very different, so that at least some nice journalists would like to talk about it without having to pay their money, but in Belgian pralines or something like that. That was okay. So yes, that was one of, I've been thinking about it, yes.
And Roman, your latest watch, it's quite a complicated one. Do you think people understand it? You've got a question of not just communicating the watch, but communicating why it's so special. Is it a risk? Do you think people appreciate the depth of the work in the complication?
Honestly, it's like a lot of things. If you just take a look, no, it's impossible. For a lot of things, you have to take the time to understand and to really wish to know more about. So that's mean I took care about that also in the vision of design and aesthetics. So I knew that that kind of complication will be maybe complicated to understand for a large public. So it's why I decided to really be an attractive design who can attract the person to get more information and to say, okay, there is a chain, so what is this? And I think it's important. It's impossible at that level of watches to think about that everybody will understand. It's like constant torque. I think constant torque is physically the principle, but that watch is a constant timekeeping. And this is more easy, I think, for everybody to understand that kind of mechanism. The finality is constant timekeeping. So, you know, that kind of concept and that kind of a complication, it's like if you talk about engineering in many things, you can be interested, but if it's not your job, it's quite impossible to understand the smallest point on. So I think we have to take care about the aesthetic to be attractive, but also to explain. So it's why I'm quite traveling a lot now to show that. But it's interesting because the design creates the emotion for everybody and create the capacity to know more and to be interesting about that.
And Stepan, why do you think, for the people here, what does an independent offer that a big brand doesn't? Assuming I like the style of one of your watches or perhaps from a bigger brand, what do you think is the main advantage from getting something from you?
It's more personal. It's a personal product. It's a personal service. It's more. There's like a human behind the product, but that's also the trouble sometimes.
Well, in your case in particular.
Maybe, but still, like it is a contact that at least on my case, because 98% of my products are going directly to the final customers. So I really work closely with the customer for the watch what I'm working on it. So that is the service that you can't find it from any bigger brands, which is easy to understand, of course.
And Richard, what do you think you offer that a larger brand doesn't?
We like to consider ourselves to be the organic farmers of watchmaking, and like the organic farmers competing against the food industry. They're not only looking for profit. So the organic farmers, and we in Austria, we are considered to have the most fields which are managed organic in the European community. So organic means to care about more than just doing a product, to do a product of very best quality. And in fact, and I'm sure my colleagues will agree, that as a small independent, you need to do even better products than the industry, because only the better product can give you the audience and can give you the spreaded word afterwards. And yeah, what we are taking as well as small independents is we are taking responsibility, a lot of responsibility, because we involve small suppliers and we select them very carefully, and this is a give and take. Like in completely opposite to the big boys in the business who are approaching suppliers and saying, listen, I want this part, and I give you that price, and that's it. This is not the way we are.
Benoit, did you ever consider, your idea was quite different, did you ever consider just selling your idea to a larger brand rather than developing it yourself?
No, I've of course, I had some contacts, but it's too fun, I have to say, until now. It's also nice what he said, because I compared it, I was thinking about fast food against slow food, but I thought it's more haute couture compared to prêt-à-porter. And so I think the smaller brands, by definition, they make haute couture. So I think that is a good metaphor. The authenticity. We sell a lot more authenticity than the bigger brands do, and I think the market has evolved for the bigger brands. Actually, they don't. Again, I'm talking as an industrial designer. They don't sell products anymore. They sell a brand. They sell an imaginary. As we are with our fingers in the machines, and we need to make sure that the product is because we have no brand, so we have to talk with facts on the table. And I think that's also coming from the fact that the bigger groups, they are not, in the beginning they were watchmakers, then they became marketing boys, and unfortunately it's more the financial industry that is running them today. And because of that, it has impacts on the content of what they do. But on the other hand, I think that these bigger brands, they are necessary for us as smaller brands. Would they not exist, we would not exist, because they create the market. And it's a bit like they take the lion's share and they leave us the carcasses. But they kill the prey, and if they don't, we would not eat. So okay, I think so that's I think the
Roman, is there anything, if anybody here was thinking to launch their own brand, is there anything that you wish you would have known beforehand that you learnt later and perhaps learnt in a hard way? Sorry, that's a surprise question. I've given them a
So, but what do you mean? Because my English is not my mother language.
Yes,
so
I'm sorry.
Explain it in another way. No problem.
Before launching a brand, if somebody could prepare, and you are someone that actually, if you went off and did an MBA, you obviously gave it some conscious thought. Is that something you would recommend for anybody? Has that been useful?
You know, my brother, I had, it was in 2000, probably 2005. I had the different possibilities, and my brother asked me, and I asked him about, and he was talking and saying to me, okay, you arrived to the beach today, and you have the choice to go in the sea or not, and to stay in the beach, but you made all of this trip just to be on the beach and look at the beach. But the thing is, it is going to be very exciting, and it could be your life to swim, but in the sea there is a lot of sharks. So you also have to know that you can stay on the beach and enjoy, or you can go inside. So You know, the watch industry is a fantastic world, but it's a real difficult world. For someone, it's to get parts. From other one is also the communication, the marketing, and all of that. So what I can say is a wonderful world, but very difficult to achieve in a certain level. And this is due to the, like you mentioned, today the watchmaking is a huge marketing and communication machinery. And we are small. We don't have this capacity to promote or to sponsorize stars and footballers and sprinters and movie stars who can explode your capacity and your possibility that people will know about your brand. So that means, for me, if a person doesn't have a real sense to doing a watch brand, it's better to doing another business. If you want to win a lot of money, go in another place. And the watchmaking is really a thing that you need to have this inside you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the panel? I can tell you that as a journalist, one of the reasons I started focusing on independent watchmakers was when you go to a big brand and you want to learn, why does this watch exist? And normally that's more important to me than what it does. Like, why did someone put all the work and money into developing this watch? You would get a different answer when you talk to a watchmaker, the CEO, the marketing department. And as a journalist, you would have to go to all of these people, work out which ones are exaggerating, lying, telling the truth. Even if they're all telling the truth, working out the balance. And that's a lot of work. When you go to an independent watchmaker, it's relatively easy because there's one person, it's his idea, he can say, this is why I did this. So this is one of the reasons I like this world of watchmaking. But please, if you've got any questions, fire away. Yes?
It's a general question. When you're getting into the initiation stage of, you've got an idea, how would you then start to get that idea out and, for example, make prototypes and all that? How would you initiate, getting into the process of building a watch or making a watch?
If you don't have, and this is just from my experience, if you do not have the ability to do a lot yourself, you'd better have a lot of money. Because I get emails, if not weekly, monthly, from people with great ideas, hoping to pitch them to an independent watchmaker, or I've got this great idea, can you tell me how to make the watch or to make a brand? You need a lot of money. And you need a lot more than an idea. In fact, one of the major achievements these four men have done, the world is full of great ideas, but turning that idea into something that tells the time on your wrist, you cannot exaggerate how difficult that is. And especially with a very small budget, their watches have to compete with the very best of these brands that have been around, some of them for centuries. Nobody's going to say, I'll accept second best because you're just a small brand. They really have to be world-class watches. I don't want to discourage you, but in fact I do, because if it's not something you would risk your career and livelihood on, don't bother. Just keep yourself busy by drawing things, because it is hard. Any other questions?
A question to Richard, and you may or may not be able to answer, but I'm interested to know. Congratulations for the prize.
Thank you very much.
Interested to know whether some of the biggies showed some interest in your, patented ideas and recruiting you, inviting you on their staff. Can you say something about that?
Actually, with the patent, it was the other way around. So the patent was actually owned by IWC. I've been the inventor in '92, and it was, and this is as well a very interesting aspect in independent watchmaking, that I know many of my colleagues who are very often taking ideas from their customers or their friends. And it was for us as well the same that in 2011 I've been reminded by a customer that this guy said, Richard, do you realize that the patent of IWC is going to expire soon? Huh? And I said, well, is it already 20 years ago? So, and in fact, it was, and we started to think about this, and there have been some reasons why we said, well, that's very interesting, and let's go for this again.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the panel, Stepan, Richard, Benoit, and Roman, and thank you very much for being here.